This treatment will be obvious as the video continues. The control sheep in each case were brought to the cattle. In this study, the unbonded sheep and cattle always had to be herded together in order to impose the test for cohesiveness with the Border Collie dog. You'll notice as you view the video that as the dog drives the sheep, they always move independent of the cattle. The dog now is driving the sheep and they're running in the opposite direction from the cattle. Initially, the dog attempts to return the sheep to the cattle, and then, following instruction from the trainer, she brings them to the observers. This is another clip on a different test. Again, you'll see that the sheep move independent of the cattle. They appear to have no attraction to the cattle. The dog, because of training, attempts to keep the two groups together and bring them as one group. But again, as you see, the sheep move completely independent of the cattle, and in this case now are leading the cattle. These cattle have been in association with the sheep over a period of a number of months and have become very tolerant of the sheep, though in no way are they bonded to the sheep. Now, as the dog is called off, you'll notice that the sheep move as an independent group to the east, and the cattle leave in another direction. Before each test of the Flerd, which consists of cattle and bonded sheep, the livestock were always found together as a cohesive group. When the dog approaches the Flerd, the lambs stay close and within a protective perimeter provided by the cattle. Almost always there were cattle between the sheep and the dog. The cattle usually would face the dog on the first approach and frequently cause the dog to stop until she was urged by her trainer. Not once during frequent tests like these did the bonded sheep move independently or separate from the cattle. As we view this video, you will note that almost always the sheep are in the safe space among the cattle. In almost every case, you'll notice that there are cattle to the left and cattle to the right and cattle in front and cattle behind. The sheep very carefully maintain this position as they are driven by the collie dog. Now in review, these sheep have been maintained in close confinement with cattle for a 60-day period when they were lambs, between 45 and 90 days of age. As you see the collie dog being faced off by the cattle, this is something which we might visualize would happen if the Flerd is approached by a coyote. The cattle stand and face off the coyote, and the sheep stay in a safe space in among the cattle. We've actually seen coyotes approach a Flerd, and this scene was depicted there, although we were unable to get it on videotape. You notice as the dog changes position, the cattle reoriented themselves facing toward the dog. You notice that as the dog pressures the cattle, one cow takes a defensive position. And again, another exchange, the cow facing the dog off, and as she leaves, you'll notice again that she, in a defensive gesture, faces the dog and then kicks at the dog as she leaves. The same scene is repeated as we saw earlier, the sheep maintaining a position in the middle of the cattle with a perimeter of cattle about them. This was very typical of the many observations that we made of the bonded sheep and the cattle.